So welcome. It's been a long time. Good to see everybody. So happy to be here. It's been like about a month that I've been here. My name is Peng, using he, him, his pronouns with the Men Masculine Folks Network, coming to you on the kitchen table conversation series that we've been having here live with all of you who are joining us here now or later on in the future as well too, or watching us later on YouTube. And you can always watch us on Facebook later on as well too. So excited today about today's conversation. We have an awesome guest with us today, Chris Stark, who's an author, a fierce advocate and leader in the work of sexual exploitation and violence against women and girls in all its forms as well too. And that said, I'm going to also ensure that my brothers and colleagues here get to introduce themselves first before we go on and have conversation with Chris here, and having Chris introduce themselves as well too after the introduction of the other folks here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felix Martinez, pronouns he, him, and his. I work for Esperanza United as an engagement men and boys program specialist. Super excited to be here to have a conversation with Chris, learn more from her, and I'm reporting from Eagan, Minnesota. Happy to be here.
Hello, y'all. My name is Serrano Robinson. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm coming out of Duluth right now, and I'm happy to be here again. So thanks.
Hey everybody, my name is Sean Hayes. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Very excited for this conversation. I'm also up in Duluth, Minnesota, part of the Men and Masculine Folks Network, as well as I work with men as peacemakers. So very excited to be with all of you here.
Very cool. I also wanted to remind people always, and folks always, that this is, we're hoping as always that this be a platform and that people can really take this conversation and continue it in their own homes, in their own circles, in their own networks as well too, and share it as well, right? Not only continue the conversation, but share it as well too, because of the various ways we might be exploring things, topics and issues, and what that all means to men and masculine folks and their lives and the way in which they navigate and practice what it means to be healthy. On that note, before I give some time for Chris to do some introduction here, I also wanted to remind folks that we have a summit that is coming up in March here. I think in the third week of March. I forgot the dates exactly. I think it's the 22nd, 23rd or so. So check us out, join us there. We're limiting that to only 25 people to come and join us at that conversation. So excited for those of you who have been following us on Kitchen Table Conversations to come in person and join us. And we'll continue to do reflection this year as well too, and really think about what it means to transcend as masculine and men folks during crisis, and to really lead in our own communities. The other part is that we're also launching our second Leadership Institute here towards the end of March as well too. And so it's really a chance and opportunity for young men ages 18 to 27 to really grow their leadership and grow their capacity and gain skills to actually do community work and do work in community that really matters and makes sense through the lens of understanding gender and queer justice, right? Did I miss anything in terms of other things that we're sharing, Sean? Okay. So definitely check us out. We will put those in the links and in the description of the video as well too. That said, really want to give some time for Chris to really share themselves and who they are with all of us. And I also want to know why we also wanted so much for Chris to join us, is really to talk about their book as well too, Carnival Lights, that they had just written. And so we're excited to sort of talk a little bit briefly about that. And then, oh yeah, Felix is holding it up, but it's like in and out, Felix, because your background is So yeah, definitely get Carnival Lights too. But I'll hand it over to Chris. Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I guess I'll just give a brief introduction. My Anishinaabe name is Nagamo Zibi Unse Kwe, and my totem is Migizi. And my English name is Chris Stark, as you probably have heard a few times now. I'm down here in Minneapolis, actually in St. Paul right now. I'm not at my house. And I'm just excited at the thought of being able to have, like a conversation from the heart, where maybe we can start to, think about how we might be able to come together and do some healing and really do some good work for the world together, because the world certainly needs good work right now, especially. I grew up in Minnesota, in different parts of Minnesota, including out in the woods up by Mille Lacs Lake. And it's one of my favorite places in the world. And I'm a writer and trainer and researcher, but most of all, I think I try to be a good person, and it might be good for us to also spend a little bit more time introducing ourselves as people, instead of sort of our titles and the things that we do in the world. So I do my best to be a good person and try to bring some healing to the world and try to speak truth to atrocities that have been hidden, silenced, and suppressed in this country. So I recently, or in July, I guess, my second novel, Carnival Lights, came out, and I started writing it 20 years ago. So it was quite an accomplishment for me to be able to finish that book, because I started to get a little worried I wasn't gonna finish it. And my experience with writing, and in particular with writing Carnival Lights, is that I had an obligation to the characters and to the stories that make up that book, that I experienced very much as they really came to me. Like I'm a co-creator of the book, in a sense. So the book is set in August of 1969 in the Twin Cities. And it only covers a few weeks over the course of two Ojibwe teen girl cousins, Sharon and Chris. But the rest of the book is a lot of backstory about their family, going back into the 1800s. And it's also actually technically historical fiction, because there's true historical events that weave in throughout the story there. And that was really a bit of a phenomenal experience for me to write that, because again, it was just like such a sense of co-creation of this story. I would have just like kind of like a empty space with part of the story, and I would know like one thing about that empty space, and I would start researching that one thing, and then all of this information I would find that actually happened here in Minnesota like fit perfectly right into that fictional narrative that I was getting down. So it was really a cool experience. And it's about a lot of different things. Sometimes people who read it talk about, oh, it's about different kinds of sexual violence, what we call sex trafficking, domestic violence, incest, and so on. So it's about those things. But what I think it's about is, I think it's about intergenerational love among the Ojibwe family and the community, and just the strength of Ojibwe traditions and Ojibwe culture. And so that's what I, take from it. But again, I've been doing this work for a long time. And so I have done my own healing around the things that were done to me growing up here in Minnesota. Of course, we're always healing all of the time, but I've done so much of my own healing that I think the love stands out for me more than the sort of violence, or sexual violence that is part of the story. And so anyway, I don't know, I have a little excerpt. I could read from it now, or I could read from it later. I think one of the things that really jumps out for me in Carnival Lights, and something that I was mentioning earlier that I don't see a lot of conversation around, and it could be just that I just, I'm not in those spaces. But I think that it might be something that could potentially be very healing, and it's something that was on my mind a lot in the writing of Carnival Lights, because there's violence, including sexual violence, that's committed against some of the boys, and teenage boys and younger boys in Carnival Lights. And it seems like we really keep things so siloed, yet there's so much intersection. And I think at those intersections, there's a significant amount of healing that can be done as individuals, looking at our own selves, but also then, in our communities, and then across those communities as well, because, all of us are in sort of, multiple communities, right? And one of the ways that I have been thinking about that is that in Anishinaabe ways, babies are the closest to the creator. And I just wonder if the older that we get, the more baggage that we carry with us, social impositions, racism and colonization and sexual violence, and, sexism, and, homophobia and transphobia and classism, all these different ways that we get harmed, that our spirits get harmed, and we move away from that being that was brought into this world, that is the closest to, the creator, and the closest to the money dude, or the spirits. And I've just been kind of thinking about also my own experiences growing up in a what we call sex trafficking and pornography ring here in Minnesota and elsewhere, is that there were a significant amount of boys who were also used in that violence. And they had sexual violence and physical violence and mental and emotional violence committed against them. And the purpose of that in the ring that I was used in was to turn those boys into perpetrators. And even though probably most of you listening to this have not had that experience, although maybe some of you have, that is a dynamic really for our culture, right? To turn, not necessarily perpetrators, but to create these hierarchies, and to create ways that, men and boys are taught to look down on, women and girls as inferior, white people taught to look down on people of color as inferior, on and on and on, all of these different hierarchies that are created. And, I know that for myself, I have found probably, the greatest healing by, in a sense, kind of going back to that young girl that I was, and really, embracing myself as a young person, and the wisdom and the love that I carried for myself and for other people, and for animals and the land, and the water and so forth. Because the things that happen to us over the course of our lives can really damage that, or teach us to really suppress it, or hide it, or move away from it, maybe even become, hateful people, maybe become violent people, maybe become, behave in ways in the world that allow us to think that we're better than other people. So that's what's on my mind. It's just a little light something to start the morning, right? but I also just want to say that I live in North Minneapolis, and I drove up on a scene yesterday where a young man had been shot in the head, and they were hosing his blood off of the sidewalk in the street. And I'm really just full up on the pain and the suffering that so many of us are going through. And I just would really like to have a conversation about how we might not so much hide behind some of the political rhetoric, or, you know, the language or the words that we use in our learned in our MSW programs. And we might really, you know, bring our hearts to this place and peel back some of the things that we have used over the course of our lives to protect ourselves. Because I'm feeling a lot of grief around that. And I do a lot of work around, you know, sex trafficking down in the cities too. And, you know, the kinds of things that people who are being used in that are going through right now are just, it's just off the rails. It's just the violence and the pain is just pretty big, and the grief is pretty big. And I guess that's what I have to say. I kind of went on for a long time, but you know, I'll be quiet. Somebody else could jump in, but those are some of the things that are really you know, up front for me right now.
Thanks so much, Chris. I think you shared, you know, you shared a lot. I think it gets us thinking, and I think the connection for me in what you shared there, and appreciating what you're sharing there, because as always, we see this space and this place where we're coming together here at the kitchen table is really to be open and whole, and to share what's on our hearts and our minds, and to come as we are, right? And really to just explore, because so sometimes we have an idea of what we're going to talk about, and sometimes we're like, we don't know, and then a ton of things come out, right? And so really appreciating you for that, and coming as you are, and get us rolling here. And I think the connection for me and what you shared is like the intentionality of kindness and goodness that you're talking about, right? And we're not talking about like, and I think it may be perhaps different from the sympathy and the empathy part, but it's like the kindness and the goodness, and sort of like the claiming of that, and perhaps maybe reclaiming of it, awakening it, or reawakening it, is essential to who we are as individuals and as people, and as a person. And it is also essential to who perhaps I am, who I am with regards to how I heal and what I want to heal, and the journey of what healing looks like. And I think the other part that you had mentioned previous to us going live, and I know you shared it briefly too, that I'm connected to that. I know we haven't fully explored in many ways here in this platform is, or medium of communication, is spirituality, right? Like, what is our connection to the spirit as men and masculine folks, as people, as we think about the kind of community that we want to be living in and being in, and the person that we want to be, and what's our connection to that. And so I think I'm always reminded of that, and appreciating you bringing in, as always, the ancestors as well too, because they're so crucial to who we are. And then obviously the connection to the kids, right? I think that to what you share there about like that visual that you gave us about cleaning up of the child's blood on the street, is very visual, right? And then that is what we are actually talking about as well too, and seeing in community is like, when might those things actually not happen, right? And so that is where I am at in my thoughts here to what you shared.
Well, Chris, that's a lot to carry. You know, obviously listening to you and what you're doing, it made me realize, you know, the privilege that I have actually living in the suburbs and probably not seeing that. But at the same time, the importance of me of being an ally and see how I can change, these negative things that are affecting, our communities. And just because I'm away, maybe it doesn't affect me directly, but that's not the world I want to live. I want to be sure, that boys and girls live in a safe world, safe of, abuse. And when you listen to you and what you're doing with this book, it is creating this much awareness, but at the same time opening our minds of what's going on out there. Things that sometimes through politics they try to hide and try to, don't expose, because they're part of the problem. I mean, the government have a lot of power to change that, and I don't think they do enough, to support those vulnerable communities, and make me think as a man, what I can do, to support this, so my daughters have a safer space, so that they don't need to be exposed to all those kids maybe walking through those cops cleaning that blood of the street, because that could be traumatizing, and how we can realize that that's not normal, that's not normal behavior. As human being, we're better than that, and we need to do more. And not because I don't live in Minneapolis, that doesn't mean I cannot do anything. So bringing this topic, it made me realize, okay, what organizations are out there that I can support, and do some community service and continue supporting that. So thank you for what you do. It's a lot that you're carrying, but I want to let you know that I appreciate it, and all those organizations and individuals that are doing, that work, to prevent, uh, commercial sexual exploitation, human trafficking, because we can do more. And thanks to these spaces and creating this awareness, we can learn a little bit and start making those right steps to that communities and that world that we want to live, respecting, like you mentioned, our lands, the water, and yeah, and all those spiritual things are important to us.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. It's just striking today watching the, young people walking to their high school where their classmate had been, shot yesterday. And just, that's where a lot of the emotion comes for me, is just like what they're carrying, just that, just, it's a lot with everything. And it's just, it's sad to me to see young people suffer like that, especially. It's sad to see anybody suffer, of course, but especially young people.
Thank you for speaking. I like a lot about what you spoke about, like healing, just like our inner selves. It's like weird for me because when I about healing, I always like revert back to like my childhood self. And I actively work with kids right now, like teaching healthy masculinity, like trying to model it the best way that I can, and also like challenging toxic masculinity, and also being like a support for the youth. So I see every day how like one like providing that open space and also modeling good behavior, right? Like I think it says a lot about adults who work with youth. Like you got to also model what you're having them trying to. You can't just tell the kid to be positive, and then on your personal time, you're doing nothing but negative shit. Like it just doesn't make any sense. Even in energy wise, even if the kids don't know you outside of like group, they'll feel that like the energy just isn't real. So when I think about healing, I just think a lot about like that. Like, because when you think about children, like it's the innocence is there. They love to have fun. They love to run around. They don't give a fuck about getting dirty. They'll figure it out.
Yep.
Like they love to have friends. They love to like be on teams. They just love it. And I noticed that you said that, and through my life, I've noticed that at some point in time we like lose that. The barriers come in, the doubt come in, the things that people were telling us, like the filters basically come in life. And I noticed that as people, we're no longer really curious, right? Like we have an abundance of people who can watch people like be harmed and just not give a fuck or just not care, or it just doesn't bother them, doesn't phase them. So on multiple forms, it really seemed like we lost like what it means to be like a child again. Like that makes sense. When I tell people what makes me happy, I'm like, I still do the shit that I used to do when I was a child. I don't have to be a child anymore to not do those things, but I still do those, like holding doors for people and being kind, like and just having those hobbies and reverting back to what happiness means to me. I think, you know, things happen in our lives, and that's not an excuse at all because we can definitely deal with the things that happen in our lives. But just thinking about that make us like either back up, use like hate as a filter, you know, use identity as a way to shift away from each other instead of a way to come together. Because I always look at like similarities, and it's both of them, right? Like I was training somebody yesterday, and I remember telling them, I was like, we're similar in what happens to us, but we're different in when it happens. Like we've all been through heartbreak, right? We've all been through like death and like not us been through death, but death in our family and stuff. But it's basically just about when you go through it. Do you have that oomph to help somebody like understand that it's going to be hard? Do you have that oomph to support somebody go through what they're going through? Um, so yeah, I just wanted to just kind of like talk about healing a little bit because I think that is like at the source of it. On the other hand, like for me, healing is also not like looking at the things that happen to me. Um, it's like 50-50. It's looking at the things that I've also done to people. When I took through like a healing journey or a phase, like most of it really was just me looking at like a darker part of myself, if that makes sense. The part that wants to, parts that wants to be insecure, the parts that want to look at other people and be like, "You're happy and I'm not." That's a problem, right? Like, so I think a lot of us too, like, have healing to where we think is just healing the things that happen to us, but it's also healing the things that we do to others and healing the things that the ways that we think. Like it really is crazy. Like if I could paint a picture of what healing looks like for me, I literally was sitting in front of me, and the other me looked like a devil, so to speak. That's how I saw it. That's how I like pictured it. But it's basically you just looking at all the things you've really been through, how it affected you, and being honest about how it made you feel. A lot of people lie, and that's what creates that misery. Is when you're lying, is when you're not trying to be truthful, or sadly, is when you don't have the support to be honest about what went down to. So I think like as far as like support, like healing, like we just gotta like revert back to that childhood. Like remember when you was like it was literally like of course we had bad days as children, but it really was like more sunny days when you were a child. It really was even just sitting at the lunch table like create like coloring in a picture book or something like that. So I think like just the lack of things that we do for ourselves as far as like hobbies, the way we see each other. And I think a lot of us sadly don't go through that internal healing. That internal healing. We all grow up sadly, whether you're rich, poor, we all grow up with like inherent traumas or things that evidently turn into trauma as we're getting older. So we all really got work to do. You know, that one person that yeah, maybe that one person that said something to us or does something to us, and instead of healing that and healing the situation that happened, we take the biasness and say, okay, that one black person did this, so fuck every other person that looks like that. Or this one woman did this, fuck everybody else that did that looks just like her. So it seems like as far as like healing too, we have a way of like generalizing things instead of actually digging deep and like why did that hurt you? Like why did that make you feel a certain way? Um, I think as far as like, I love you just talking about healing, reverting back to like the childhood. Because at any moment when I think about healing, it's 50% is like reverting back to my childhood and my hobbies and riding bikes and going outside and just breathing, knowing that everybody is here for a reason. We all are valued. Like that's how you are as children. We don't really care. Like as long as we got all our friends in the huddle, life is perfect. And the other 50% is like looking at the things that are going to try to like take you off that route as you get older because they're going to happen, right? Like you're going to have heartbreak, you're going to have things, you're going to have just instances where harm happens to you as well. And you got to be able to know and to differ. You got to be able to see that line between I was hurt, but I also don't want to hurt somebody else going forward. Because that line is very, very, it's not an excuse, but the line is thin. But once you start crossing that line of, oh, well, I'm doing this because this is what happened to me, that's complete BS in my opinion. You have to check. Like, I can never be like, hey, I'm going to hurt you because my dad just wasn't around or because I don't understand like how to be a man because he wasn't around. Like that, of course that happened, but that's also like past tense. It's something that I have to work on. So I really just love like just hearing you like just speak in general, just hearing you talk about healing and just like the connection between like reverting back to who we are as children. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful.
Hard to follow all of you wonderful brothers here. But yeah, I think of what you shared, Chris, and what Pang and Felix and Serrano are sharing too is resonating with me. And part of what you were sharing about that sort of reconnecting to that that younger me or that littler version of ourselves, made me think of something one of my teachers, Norma Wong, I remember the first time she said this, I was like, what? And she was talking about how all of us as humans, when we enter this world, like we are whole. We come into this world whole, and then pain and oppression and violence enter in, right? Like, you know, like Serrano, what you were saying, it varies when that happens to different people, and based on the privilege I may have, that may come later in life for me. And that was really powerful for me, because I think so often we're just like, we talk about healing in a way where it's like we're just these broken pieces trying to figure out how to like put something back together. That feels really, really hard. Like healing on a personal level is like so hard, so difficult, and can be so painful. And yet on the other side of that, not like it's a binary, right? But like the positives and the joy and the care and kindness that comes when we can reconnect to that part, or like remember that being within us, that like gives me so much hope. And as a parent to a 3-year-old who is already, you know, she's already using some violence of her own. She's biting some friends and pushing, and like that stuff starts really young. And that's challenging as a parent. But also, like, if I can take the time to be present with her as we're sitting on the floor playing, and building a Lego castle, and just being able to like really be present with her and see the world through her eyes. Like I just, there's something about that. And it came up earlier in a conversation this morning too, about like the incredible power that I think our youth have to sort of help us as adults shape that vision of the world that we're like working towards. Because I think, you know, as has been said, we lose these things, we're impacted by the pain and sorrow and trauma. And it's so easy to like stay disconnected from that way of being, and that way of just trying to like find the good, and to like continue creating that goodness wherever we are, whether it's, you know, in my home here with my wife and child, or whether it's, you know, out in the community with all of us. And I really think it's interesting. I don't know the answer to this, but like you talked about both individual healing as well as collective healing. And I'm curious, because I hear that a lot. You know, you mentioned like, let's try to stay away from these political sort of buzzword kind of talk. And I'm really curious about that. Like, what does collective healing look like? Do I have to be doing my own work healing in order to then enter into this collective place? Or like, I just wonder about that. But I feel like I'm like on the verge of figuring something out in my own life. And so maybe that's what this is. Maybe this is collective healing right here, which I'm grateful for. But yeah, I just, reconnecting to the wholeness and the fullness of ourselves, I think is so powerful and brings so much goodness to the rest of our communities.
Yeah. 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 And you know, one of the things I like to think about too is like what you're saying, Sean, you know, being out in the world, and especially, you know, down here in the cities right now, there's just so much pain, there's so much anxiety and uncertainty and so on. And you know, just going out into the world and not adding to that. So, you know, just not putting that out there, because that goes somewhere. It bounces around, and it's energy that goes from me, and then it goes over to here to you, and then you go over here, and you know, and it has kind of a life of its own. And to me right now, that's just something that's really, you know, on my mind. You know, I understand people might be like, oh, that's the really little small thing, but I'm not sure that it is that little or small, in terms of really just, you know, wanting to go out into the world and bring some positivity to the world. In these times, it seems very important. But yeah, you know, I grew up in a very violent environment, and I never wanted to become like the perpetrators. Most of the perpetrators were men, but not all of them. There were a couple of women who were perpetrators as well. And that consumed a significant amount of my thinking as a child, was to how not to become them. And I had my grandmothers to look to as models in terms of how to be in the world. And I read books and I listened to song lyrics. But my biggest fear was that I would become one of those, as I said, when I was little, bad people. And one of the ways that they controlled me was they would hurt my animals in front of me. They would hurt other animals, and they would hurt my family members and other children as well. That's how they controlled all of us. And so what I learned at a young age was that if I felt love for someone, if I loved someone or I cared about them, I had to hide it, because my love would bring destruction to that person, because they then would hurt that person or attack that person. And it was through healing, through ceremonies. Someone's at the door, sorry. It was through, the ceremonies. Hey, I'm on a webinar right now. Can I have a few minutes? Sorry, I'm not not at home right now. It was really through ceremony, Sean, talking about healing and community, that I really started to become aware, because I hadn't even really been aware of that, right? It was just something that like I was holding to get through the world for such a long time, that I had to, first of all, become aware of it, and then second of all, figure out what to do for myself. So I had a very hard time expressing any kind of love for other people, because I was afraid of that. And I wanted to kind of hide that in myself. And I was more comfortable if somebody thought that, I was, I don't know, sarcastic or whatever, and then when I realized that that was a survival strategy that I had carried forward into my adult life, I started praying when we put out tobacco, and I started praying, help me to live this day out of love. And what a complete difference it has made in my life, and the amount of happiness and joy and positive connectivity that I feel with other people. And I don't have to feel like I have to hide that or only show it just a little bit to that, like that one person. I'll just briefly tell you I love you, and then that'll be good enough, and so forth. But anyways, that's just kind of what it made me think of. And I know that I've talked about this a little bit, and that, some other people, like it resonates with them as well. But just thinking about the ways that, we put up these barriers to keep ourselves safe. And then when do they no longer become, a positive for us or for, other people in our lives, is, I think, very important for us to think about as well. So my friend Babette and I did a talk at St. Kate's a couple of months ago, and it was to social workers. And so the social workers, I think, were kind of expecting like a social worky kind of talk, and it veered off into something very different. And so now we talk about the love revolution, because we need all of those analytical pieces, and we need all those political pieces and those intellectual pieces. But if we're not bringing love to the table, if we're not bringing care for each other to the table, genuine care, we're not really gonna make much of a difference, I don't think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Chris, in terms of like the love. I appreciate you being able to name like that internal sense of awareness, has to happen first. That is like, I think the breaking piece, or the ice breaking, I would say, piece that then initiates the place of like, then what do I do about it, which is the next step that you named. And so I find that that's really regrounding for us in these moments when we talk about what does it mean to practice healthy masculinity, which is part of like what you're talking about there in terms of kindness, love, and all of that is like, I myself have to come to this awareness place of like wanting to perhaps shift something, right? But before even I could shift anything, there has to be like some awareness, something that has happened inside of me where it prompted me to be like, oh, and then it gets to the next stage of like, then what do I do about it? Then what do I do about it? And I think I appreciate that naming in this space because it is something for us to really think about, especially I think in the conversation around healing and the responsibility of that, like my individual sense of responsibility in that, and what does that mean for myself is really important. And I don't think that people think about it that way, or may not see it that way as well too, or may just think that this is just how things are, right? And I was having a conversation with a few folks in the past, and I was like, if your awareness is, this is how I am, and this is how I should be, or this is how I am, I should say that, and you're content with that at that moment in your life, and you don't believe that you are anything other than that because that's your personality, right? Then you're gonna have to learn to live with those things, right? Whatever it is that you have learned to survive and how you survive, even if it has a negative impact, quote unquote, on other people, right? Then you have to learn to live with that, and you'll have to learn to take the responsibilities and that come with that. And if you come to the place of like that awareness and the like, I want to do something different because I don't think that that's who I want to be or how I am showing up in the world, then you can explore. Then you can become more curious in that exploration of like, then who do I want to be, right? And I think the visioning part and the imagination part that you were talking about is so crucial. It's so crucial to being able to actually like imagine myself of what I am and can be. And we have to have that. You know, I think you talked about it, Serrano talked about it, Sean talked about like the kid part of it is that reclaiming our kid, is to reclaim that imagination, right? With what is possible, it means we have to think about these things that we may have not ever experienced or seen before. That is what makes it possible, is the imagination in that, right? The imagination allows us to actually make things very possible that we didn't ever think was possible, right? I think flying, for example, like people flying on planes, like it was through imagination that allowed people to actually be on planes. Is the most microscopic example and that I can give in this moment, what I'm articulating or sharing here, right? And so I think that even in healing, people have to, in that awareness and ice breaking part is to imagine, right? And the imagination in that. And I think that going back to the book and your sharing of the book by the two cousins, is there's imagination in that as well too, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I really love just hearing y'all talk about energy, because it's real and it's weird that like in this world we don't believe in like energy, but we believe in karma, which is the exact same thing. They're just two different words. It's basically like what you put out, right? The energy you feed, and that can change. Like literally, that can change. Like and I love that you talk about paying about imagination, because you have to literally, if it doesn't already exist, you really have to like try to imagine it to be true. And that's literally like the mind-blowing concept, is like sometimes we haven't hit that point of like imagining something that's not already here. We're so stuck on shit that's already here that we're like, it's here and that's fine. and that's okay with it. And it's like, no, it's not. We could be different. We can definitely change because energy is always interchangeable. I literally remember like being a 15-year-old boy and really not giving a fuck about nobody. And I really don't mean this like to be big headed. I don't mean it to be like saying that it's cool. I don't condone that shit at all. This is just me being honest. Like I really didn't like at all. And it was just because of what I was going through, sadly. And that's not an excuse. I blame myself. But as I got older, I literally was like, okay, I know I'm going to make mistakes, but from now on, I'm not making any more intentional. You know what I mean? I'm not doing like, I'm going to be like intentionally kind for the rest of my life. And I'm cool with that. Like, it literally is a choice that you have to literally make. Instead of like getting upset or saying jealous, like you have to like make the absolute choice to do something different. And I love that we talked about like imagination, because it's weird that I was literally working with the youth yesterday and we were doing pre-surveys that should have been pre, but obviously we were in the middle, so I was like honest about that. But we're doing pre-surveys, and what the surveys actually do is it helps us, or it helps us and them understand if we're doing the right job, right? So one of the questions was is that I think boys should, I think it's good for boys to fight no matter what. That's just what boys do. So I like to read it with them because kids, they like take things out of context and they don't hear it correctly, or the way you ask them, so I like to read it with them. And then the young boys was just like, well, yeah, that's what they was like, yeah, and they was like, I agree, and they were like, that's because that's what's here, that's what we do. And I stopped there. I said, okay. I said, I'm a man of reality too, so I understand and I hear that. I said, but should we? And literally, it changed to be like, oh no, 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 no. So it was clear to them to see that, like, even though they're living, because I don't lie to kids. Like, that's not my MO. I don't lie at all. Like, at least at this point in my life, I can't do it. So I would be like, it would be bad for me to tell that kid that that's not true, that boys just fight and people think that that's okay. But I also gave him a step further of imagining, well, what if we couldn't? What if we had the chance and we didn't? And literally all their expressions and answers changed. They were like, oh no, then I disagree. And sometimes, sadly, it is like what your reality is already into. So it's like a mixture of reality and optimism at the same time. Like optimism, so you don't fly off with a balloon, you don't get too high in the air, and then realism, so you can stay on the ground too. So I just love the fact that to hear people talk about energy, to talk about like channeling because it really is what you feed. Like I'll have friends who literally ask like, how are you like positive? And I'm like, I get so upset because I'm just like, walk with me instead of ask me. Like don't ask, don't do what I say, like watch what I do more so. Like just I be like heartbroken. Like just walk with me, bro. Just walk with me. You'll see, like, you don't have to do the bullshit, you don't have to do the drama, you don't have to do things you don't really believe in. Like do what you really love and what you really want. You will see that like your wolf will literally change. That wolf will fade away, the other wolf will slowly appear, and you will be fine. But it's just that fade, right? It's that transition from, because you ain't gonna see anything when the wolf fades and you're waiting for the next wolf to come. So there's a moment in which it's hard, but we gotta stick that through, like especially for people that we love, for the kids, for the women, like we gotta stick that through. We gotta stick the transition through because energy is real, and I can't lie to you more. Like you put out that negative energy, like you're gonna get that. Like there was days where I literally would just be literally kind to people, and that's how I was raised, and I lost that way as a teen, and I came back to that. And then there'd be days where I'm just like, why do people like buy me shit or like have parties for me or just random stuff? And I'm like, that's what good karma looks like. And a lot of times we deny it. We love the bad karma shit and the bad wolf talk, but we have to be more fruitful about the positive karma talk. Like when you find that doll on the street, or when somebody just gives you something out of nowhere, or I come into work and somebody left a gift on my desk, like, and if for no reason, there was no context to it, that's the energy brought back to you. So forever, like, for lack of better words, like energy and karma, that basically is the same thing. I think we just use that as ways of, we use karma in like a negative, oh, whatever bad you comes up bad, but it's the same shit for positive. Like whatever you put out in the world, like, you plant them seeds are going to grow. So I just love hearing you talk about energy, and yeah, just choosing which wolf to feed at that moment.
Yeah, I so agree. I so agree. The world is a beautiful place, and the world is very brutal too. And everything in between those two things. And you have to keep your eye on the beauty. or you're gonna get just totally overwhelmed by, you know, the brutality of it, or just even just being shut down, you know, just being shut down and tuned out. Yeah. Anyone? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we need to normalize that it's okay to not be okay. I think we're all living in with this mask of, you know, being afraid of being judged, being afraid of not being good, to be weakness when life is hard. We all go through our ups and downs, and that's important of self-care, of asking, you know, our neighbors or the people around us, you know, are you okay? You know, how I can support you. I think that's something that is very, very important at the time of healing and exploring different ways, you know, because whatever worked for Sean or Pang, maybe doesn't work for me, you know, based in my experiences in my life and, you know, and the ways I grow up, you know, and my privileges and my biases. So I think it's going to be always different. But I think from all those, you know, opportunities of healing or exercises, you can get something that could be useful, and not being afraid to explore them, you know, because I think once we find ourselves in a point that we feel comfortable that we're starting to deal with our trauma, then we can be more efficient when we're trying to support other people, you know, and be aware of, you know, what other people are going through. I mean, sometimes it's easier to ignore things when in reality, you know, we live in a very cruel world, you know. So yeah, I think healthcare, you know, self care is something that's super important. Something that I'm still learning. Something still new for me that I'm starting to be more comfortable. But yeah, I think that don't be afraid of exploring, you know, different ways of taking care of yourself and your loved ones.
And I just wanted to, something there, Felix, made me think about just that it's a new concept, and I know we're coming up to time, but like for me, just thinking about like what really is at the root of this violence and this hate and cruelty in the world. And for me, what I keep coming back to is like we have a choice whether we show up in community from like a fear-based place, or if we're showing up and being curious. I think I liked that what you said, Felix. Like if we can come from that curiosity place and that openness to you know, embrace these differences that we see between us as individuals and communities and cultures all around the world, you know. But I just keep coming back to that. Like it's so easy to just slip back into this sort of fear mindset of like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right thing to do is, so I'm just going to kind of sit back. And I'm tired of sitting back. I want to really try to practice that curiosity and yeah, and the other piece just that I'll quickly say is like, I don't believe that I can do this on my own. Like, I don't think any of us are meant to do this on our own, to like be that, you know, the one person working on healing. And so I just am feeling really grateful for, you know, the more conversations we have like this, the more folks we bring in who are talking about these same things, like it just fills me with hope. And like in those moments of overwhelm, in those moments of like, why is shit so bad all the time? Like that's the reminder that I need of like, it's actually not. It may feel like it in this moment, but like tomorrow, in 15 minutes from now, like I can remember the goodness, the good people around me, and that we're all sort of moving in this path together.
You know, I was like, oh, there's so many thoughts, but I'm reminded of to Serrano's point there in my closing thought here, I should say, is the other day somehow, I think last week or something like that, it was so odd. It was like maybe, you know, to that energy point that Serrano was talking about, and the clarification here is, I can look in my life and reflect in my life and see instances where a lot of like bad karma has happened or bad things have happened, like really bad things have happened. And yet I'm like, I'm still here, right? And I think that we could see that in going back to Chris's starting place too, that Chris started us with in this conversation is there has been so many horrific things that people have experienced or that I have experienced in my own life. And if I were to just dwell on those things or to just live on those things in my life, then I would totally consider my life like in ruins, right? And I would say that it's a complete mess. And I would say that I couldn't do anything, right? To Serrano's point there around energy too. So it was funny that it came out randomly because I was, it was because there were so many people saying good luck to me. And I was like, I don't think it's about luck. I think that we have the will and the choice to Sean's point there too, is the choice to do something, right? That you said, Chris, the choice to do something. And we have that. And I know that because of the systems of oppression and things like that, we may have different choices for some of us, and for some of us, may have limited choices. And yet I believe we do have choices to do something right and to do something different. And I think that that's a revolutionary act of healing that you're talking about, Chris. So I just wanted to briefly share that as well in my closing thoughts here, and really appreciate Chris for moving us and being here with us. I know we were supposed to have it last month, but then we had to postpone it, and so really appreciate it happening this month as well too. I just want to give a shout out that next Tuesday, February 14th is Missing Murdered Indigenous Women's Day. So go out, attend the events that are happening in your local localities. We will also share some of the things on our Facebook page as well too. But want to see if there's any closing thoughts from you, Chris, before Sean closes us out here.
No, I just really appreciate, you bringing me into your space and having this conversation. And I really enjoyed listening to everything that, you all had to say. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you again, Chris. I know you and I talked a lot like leading up to this conversation, and so I feel really just excited that we were able to be here together and to really hear what you brought forward there around like goodness and kindness and the hope and reconnecting to better ways, how we can show up in a good way for our communities. So thank you again to all of you viewers who have joined us, whether you're live or watching this after the fact. We are so grateful to be in community with you, and that you're choosing to join our conversations that feel really important and really urgent at a time like this in our worlds. So thank you again for tuning in. We want to thank our funding partners, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, as well as the Novo Foundation, for all of their support and partnership. And as a reminder, our conversations happen every other Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. And yes, buy Carnival Lights. I have already dropped a link in the comments of this live video, so go click it right now. Buy all of the copies. It is worth it, and it is a beautiful story. So thank you. And just wanting to lift up too, Chris, that you were nominated. Your novel is nominated for a Minnesota Book Award. So congrats about that. And we really hope that all of you will be able to go out and find that copy of Carnival Lights. Yeah, and so next time, 2 weeks from today, we're excited, February 24th at noon, we are going to be joined by two of our friends, special guest stars who were a part of our very first cohort of the Community Leadership Institute. So we are very excited to hear from Hunter and David about their experiences with the Institute. They're going to tell us a little bit about some community projects that they're working on as well, which is sort of the second phase of our Leadership Institute. So very excited to hear what those two are dreaming up in order to, create safe spaces for folks where they're located. So definitely join us next time as we're chatting with those guys. Don't forget to like our Facebook page right now. Click the like button. Find us on YouTube. We're on there too. You can find all previous conversations. And again, just thank you. We're grateful to be in community with each of you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, all of you brothers. And to Ed and Roderick, who were able to be here. Lots of love sending your way as well. So take care, everybody.
Hey, big witch.